In a small village, Adisa lived with her two daughters, Amma, her eldest, and Zuri, her youngest. Amma was 10, responsible and quiet, while little Zuri was only 5, lively and full of questions. Adisa had always loved Amma deeply, finding comfort in her calm and obedient nature. Amma reminded Adisa of herself before life had taken a difficult turn. But when Zuri was born, things changed. Adisa felt only resentment toward her youngest child, a feeling she couldn't shake, even as Zuri looked at her with innocent eyes. The truth was, Zuri's father had left just after she was born, abandoning them and leaving Adisa to manage alone. She saw his face in Zuri's smile, and every time Zuri laughed or clung to her, it reminded Adisa of the betrayal she had suffered. She would look at Amma with pride, but with Zuri, all she felt was bitterness. Zuri adored her big sister and her mother, following them around the house, always looking for a sign of warmth. One evening, as they sat around a small fire in their home, Zuri asked, "Mama, can I sit next to you?" Her voice was full of hope, her eyes shining with longing. Adisa looked away, her face cold. "Sit with your sister," she said. Amma reached for Zuri's hand, pulling her close to comfort her little sister. Zuri leaned against Amma, her heart sinking. She didn't understand why her mother was so distant, but she held on to the warmth her big sister gave her. As the days passed, Adisa's coldness became more obvious to the villagers. Some pitied Zuri, while others shook their heads in silence. But Zuri never gave up, always hoping for a small sign of love from her mother. Amma, wise beyond her years, saw her mother's pain. She noticed how Adisa sometimes looked at Zuri with a mix of sadness and anger. Amma wanted to fix things, but she didn't know how. One afternoon, as rain poured outside, Zuri waited by the window, watching the drops race down the glass. She wished her mother would sit with her, even just once. But as the evening faded, she knew her mother would stay away, just as she always does. And in her bed that night, Adisa lay awake, her heart troubled. She wondered why she couldn't feel the same love for Zuri that she felt for Amma. The question lingered in her mind, and for the first time, she thought about the walls she had built around her heart. Would she ever let Zuri in, or would Zuri always be left waiting? Years passed. Amma and Zuri grew into beautiful young women, but the love and warmth Zuri longed for from her mother remained just out of reach. From the time they were children, Adisa had shown her favoritism toward Amma, praising her elder daughter while belittling Zuri at every chance. The words Adisa used toward Zuri were harsh, dismissive, and filled with anger. Amma noticed her mother's disdain and grew comfortable with it, using it to her own advantage. When they were younger, Amma was just a sister to Zuri. They would play and laugh together. But as Adisa's resentment grew more visible, Amma began to see Zuri not as her sibling but as someone she could mistreat with her mother's silent approval. Soon, Amma started following her mother's lead, using every opportunity to show her superiority over Zuri. She would snap at her, shove her aside, and sometimes even hit her for the smallest things. Zuri tried to stand up for herself, but her words and action always fell short. Amma was clever. She knew how to turn every situation in her favor. Each time Zuri tried to defend herself, Amma would twist the story to their mother, making it seem like Zuri was the one at fault. Adisa would only shake her head at Zuri, reinforcing the idea that Zuri was a burden or disappointment. Night after night, Zuri would sit alone, wondering why she wasn't good enough. Sometimes, she would leave the compound and sleep outside, letting the cool night air calm her tears. She hoped each time that her absence would make her mother worry, maybe even come looking for her. But each morning, she would return, finding her mother indifferent, never asking where she had gone or if she was safe. As the years passed, Amma mastered the art of pretending. She would dress neatly, tell her mother where she was going, and act every bit the obedient daughter. "Mama, I'll be back soon," she would say sweetly before leaving the house. Adisa would nod approvingly, seeing in Amma everything they thought a daughter should be. But once she was out of sight, Ama's true nature emerged. She flirted with men around the village, ignoring the very rules she pretended to follow at home. She found excitement in the attention she received, meeting with men who promised her money and gifts, plain men who saw her as young and beautiful. Ama enjoyed the thrill, the secrecy, the feeling of doing what her mother would never suspect. Back at home, Zuri still tried to prove her worth, longing for her mother's approval. She worked harder than ever, helping with chores, staying quiet, hoping that her mother might notice her efforts. But it was never enough. No matter how much she tried, Adisa's gaze would always shift to Ama, her good daughter. The distance between Zuri and Ama grew into bitterness. Ama had learned from their mother's example how to make Zuri feel small, and Zuri had learned that no matter what she did, it would never be enough. Each time Ama returned home with a sweet smile, telling her mother how she had spent her time in the village, Zuri would feel a stab of anger, knowing the truth. But she kept quiet, for she knew no one would believe her, not even her own mother. And so, night after night, Zuri lay alone with her heart, wondering if she would ever escape this shadow of rejection, if she would ever be loved for who she was. As the years continued to pass, the bond between Ama and Zuri grew strained, turning them from sisters into something closer to rivals. With each passing day, Zuri found herself more isolated, her mother's coldness deepening the distance between them. Meanwhile, Ama grew bolder in her two-faced nature, always showing her mother a picture of loyalty and obedience while hiding her true self from everyone else. Adisa had only one close friend in the village, a woman named Mama Chika. They often spent time together, sharing stories and advice, a rare friendship Adisa had come to value. Often, Adisa would visit Mama Chika, and there she would complain about Zuri, her youngest child. "She's so stubborn, Mama Chika," Adisa would sigh. "No matter what I do, she won't listen. She leaves the house without telling me, comes back whenever she pleases. I've tried to discipline her, but it seems nothing works. She's nothing like Ama." Mama Chika would nod, listening as Adisa vented her frustration. It was clear to her and to many others in the village that Adisa had never shown Zuri the same affection she did for Ama. Still, Mama Chika remained quiet, knowing her friend was too set in her ways to hear any criticism. "And Ama," Adisa continued, her face softening, "Ama is exactly the daughter I always wanted. She's so respectful, so responsible. She always lets me know where she's going and what she's doing. I never have to worry about her." As if on cue, Ama walked up to the doorway of Mama Chika's hut, her footsteps light. "Mama, I'm going to the village market. I'll be back before dusk," she said with a sweet, respectful tone. She gave a quick smile to her mother's friend, who looked on with quiet understanding. Adisa beamed with pride, pointing toward Ama as she left. "Can you see, Mama Chika? Do you see what I'm saying? This girl is truly a blessing, so disciplined, so dependable. She never leaves without letting me know where she's going. She's a true daughter. But Zuri, she would never do such a thing. She doesn't care to tell me her whereabouts." Mama Chika raised an eyebrow, choosing her words carefully. "Sometimes, Adisa, a mother's heart sees what it wants to see. Children may act differently with us than they do when we're not around." But Adisa waved her off, dismissing her words. "No, Ama would never betray my trust. She's always been a sweet soul. It's Zuri who is the problem. No matter how hard I try, she's like a wide branch that refuses to grow straight." Mama Chika fell silent, sensing that nothing she said would change her friend's opinion. She knew Adisa's heart had been hardened against Zuri for so long that she no longer saw her youngest daughter for who she truly was. As Ama disappeared down the path, heading out into the village, a smile crept onto her face, hidden from her mother's eyes. She knew exactly how to play the part that Adisa adored, carefully crafting a perfect image while living a life of freedom. Ama thrived on the duality, knowing her mother would never suspect her, and her sister, Zuri, was too beaten down to expose her. Back at Mama Chika's hut, Adisa continued to list her grievances against Zuri, unaware that she was driving her youngest child further away with each word. Meanwhile, Zuri sat alone by the edge of the village, her heart heavy with the pain of years spent chasing a mother's love that never seemed to come. She had watched as her mother's love and praise were showered on her elder sister, while she was left to bear the weight of disappointment and neglect. Each time she returned home, hoping things would be different, only to be met with the same indifference, the same coldness. And as she gazed out at the setting sun, she wondered if she would ever escape the shadow of her sister, or if her mother's heart would ever soften enough to see her as more than a burden. As time passed, the house seemed divided into two. It was Adisa and Ama on one side, and Zuri, always feeling alone, on the other. The sisters' relationship grew colder with each day, and now it seemed they could barely look at each other without feeling resentment. Whenever her mother's words stung too deeply, or Ama's attitude pushed her over the edge, Zuri would escape. She would leave the house, letting the cool air soothe her heart. One day, while sitting by the river, she met someone new, Tunde, a young man from a neighboring village. Tunde had a gentle way about him, and whenever he saw Zuri looking sad, he would sit with her, make small jokes, telling stories, and soon Zuri felt her spirits lift. Tunde became her safe place, a friend she could rely on. Meanwhile, Ama continued to be her mother's perfect daughter. She would talk sweetly to Adisa, keeping up her innocent act, always making sure to tell her mother her whereabouts. Adisa, of course, continued to praise her eldest child, convinced she was a model daughter. One day, Adisa planned a visit to her friend Mama Chika's house, and Ama quickly asked to come along. She had heard that Chika's nephew from the city was visiting and was eager to meet him. Zuri, who rarely got invited anywhere, begged to join them this time. After a long pause, Adisa agreed, but only because Mama Chika had asked if Zuri could come. When they arrived, Mama Chika warmly welcomed them. Soon, the women settled into their own conversation, and Ama quickly found her way to Chika's nephew, who was every bit as charming as she had hoped. They laughed together, leaving Zuri to sit alone. Feeling as if she were invisible, it seemed no one noticed her silence or the sadness that clouded her face. After a while, Zuri couldn't bear it anymore. She stood up, wanting to escape the heaviness in her chest. Just as she reached the door, her mother's voice rang out sharply. "Where do you think you're going?" Zuri hesitated, feeling all the eyes in the room on her. She looked back at her mother, her face calm but tired. "I'm going outside," she said firmly. For a moment, there was silence. Then Adisa simply nodded, as if dismissing her. Zuri left, feeling the familiar sting of loneliness, yet somehow standing up for herself had brought a small, hidden strength to her heart. Zuri's life at home was lonely, but she found happiness in her friendship with Tunde. He gave her hope, and over time, they fell in love. When Tunde decided to ask Zuri's mother for permission to marry her, she reacted coldly, saying, "Take her if you want, she's yours for free. There's nothing special about her." Hurt but determined, Zuri and Tunde quietly got married, and for the first time, Zuri felt loved and safe. Meanwhile, Chike's nephew had been eagerly waiting to introduce Ama to his friends, believing she was different from the other village girls. But his friends were cautious, warning him about past troubles with village girls. One friend shared how one of them had hurt him deeply. When Ama finally arrived, one friend recognized her immediately, exclaiming, "This is the same girl. She has ruined lives here, even gave a deadly disease to a friend of mine." Heartbroken, Chike's nephew ended things with Ama on the spot. Devastated, Ama went home in tears and confronted her mother, blaming her for always encouraging her. Seeing her daughter's pain, Adisa, their mother, began to realize the hurt she had caused, especially to Zuri. Both mother and daughter wished to find Zuri to apologize, but they soon learned she had already left the village and was happily settled with Tunde. From that day on, Ama and her mother lived with the pain and regrets of their past actions, knowing they might never have a chance to make amends. Zuri's new life with Tunde was filled with happiness, and they were soon blessed with a baby boy. Meanwhile, Ama fell ill from a deadly disease and passed away, leaving their mother, Adisa, in deep regret. Unable to bear the guilt of losing both daughters, Adisa ended her own life. Years later, Zuri returned to the village and learned of her mother's tragic death. Though saddened, she found peace with Tunde by her side, and together they moved forward, cherishing the family they had built. Thank you for watching. This story reminds us of the power of choices and forgiveness. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell for more. Share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear from you. See you in the next story.